The next section in 14.1 is about the cosine graph. We've already discussed in class and started to make a cheat sheet that dealt with the sine function. And what you see over here on the left that I'm circling in red is our table that we made based on theta, which is in radians, and the y values of the function. Now, if you could find this circle graph that we made as a cheat sheet, and also I'm going to flip forward one slide, if you can find this graph that we started to make that has the sine function on, today we're going to do the cosine. Okay, so now I'm going to go back. What I want you to do is flip over to the back side of the graph sheet, the one that has the picture of the sine function on. We already put this table on the back side, most of us did. We're now going to do cosine of theta. So again, you can make this table, and what I did is I picked angles for theta that go up in increments of 45 degrees. For instance, pi over 4 is 45 degrees, pi over 2 is 90 degrees, etc., just like I did with the sine graph over here. And what we're going to do is we are going to evaluate the cosine function for all those different values, exactly like we did for sine. Now, in our circle graph, or in our unit circle, I underlined in green the values that we are going to use. And specifically, I'm going to circle all the values that are increments of 45 degrees. The ones that I'm circling in red are the ones that we need to use. Now, if you also recall from our studies, the cosine values of theta are the x values in this table or in this unit circle. So, if I'm going to evaluate the cosine of 0 degrees, the cosine is the first value, which is 1. That's the x value. At pi over 4, the cosine of pi over 4 is the first value, which is square root of 2 over 2, which is the same as 0.7071. The cosine of 90 degrees, or pi over 2, is 0. The cosine of 3 pi over 4 is negative square root of 2 over 2. So that's negative 0.7071, just like we did with the sine. Cosine of 180 degrees, or cosine of pi, the first value is negative 1 from our chart. Cosine of 5 pi over 4 is negative square root of 2 over 2, which is negative 0.7071. Cosine of 270, which is 3 pi over 2, that's 0. Cosine of 7 pi over 4 is positive 0.7071. And the cosine of 2 pi, if we're back to 0 again, is 1. And now you filled out your table of values. Now again, if we look at this table of values, what is the pattern? Well, it starts high, it starts at 1, goes down to 0, keeps going down to negative 1, and then comes back up to positive 1. So this graph is going to start high, go low, and then finish high. Now, if you need to pause the video and copy that down, please do. But now we're going to graph that data. So let's go to our graphs of the sine and cosine function. The blue graph, if you recall, we were color coding. That was the sine of theta. The red graph is going to be cosine of theta. So if you want to pull out your red pens, we're going to do this all in red. So, at 0 radians, the cosine value is 1, so I'm going to put a dot there. The cosine of pi over 4 is 0.7071. At pi over 2, we're at 0. Just going through those table values. At 3 pi over 4, it's negative 0.7071. At pi, we're down at negative 1. That's the minimum of our data. 5 pi over 4, we're back to negative 0.7071. At 3 pi over 2, we're back to 0. At 7 pi over 4, we're at 0.7071, roughly about right there. And at 2 pi, our function value is back to 1. So just like we said in the video, we're going to draw a smooth curve, or just like we said, sorry, in the table. We're going to start high, and we're going to go low to the minimum, and then we're going to come back up, and we're off just a little bit there, so I'm going to redraw that again one more time. Roughly, it's going to go like this. And there is your sine curve. It's going to look exactly like the sine curve. Sorry, that the cosine curve is in red. It's going to look like the sine curve, but it's off by pi over 2. That's the first cycle. That's cycle number 1. Now, in cycle number 2, I'm going to repeat, and I'm going to do this again dotted line-wise for everybody. And so you can see roughly that we are going to have 2 cycles on our graph. Roughly like this. Sorry, the smartboard is just slightly off a little bit. But if I draw a dotted line, there you go. So there you have 2 cycles of the cosine curve. Now the domain is the same as the sine curve. The domain is going to be all real numbers, because I can put any number in for x or for theta and get an answer. The range is also going to be the same. The lowest the graph gets is -1, and the highest the graph gets is +1. So my range will also be the same. Amplitude. You're going to notice amplitude is also the same. Remember, amplitude is the vertical line distance between the maximum and the halfway point, which is right here at 0. So the amplitude is also going to be 1. And the period is how long it takes to complete one cycle. Well, one cycle gets done for the cosine graph right there, which is 2 pi. So you're going to notice all our data for both sine and cosine are exactly the same. If you need to pause the video again, please do to copy that information down. But now we should have our cheat sheet completed for both the sine curve and the cosine curve. Now let's talk about the general form of the cosine equation. Everything is going to be very similar and work exactly like the sine function. The general form of the cosine equation is y equals a times cosine b theta. Same as the sine. The absolute value of a is the amplitude. The b value is the frequency. The period of the cosine function is 2 pi over the absolute value of b. And theta is in radians, just like what we did with the sine function. So again, copy that down. And when you do your graphing or do your example problems, they're going to work exactly the same as what we discussed in class for sine. So let's do one example. Let's say you're given the equation y equals -6 cosine 7 theta. What is the amplitude? Well, the amplitude is the a value, the absolute value of a, so the amplitude is going to be 6. What is the frequency? The frequency is the b value. The frequency is going to be 7. What does the frequency tell you about the graph? Well, the 7 is going to tell us that this graph, there will be 7 cycles of the graph, of the cosine graph, from 0 to 2 pi. So you'll see 7 cosine waves. Now, what is the period? Remember, the period is 2 pi over the absolute value of b. So b is 7, so therefore I'm just going to put a 7 in, so the period of this graph will be 2 pi over 7. And finally, what does the negative sign do? This negative sign right in front of the 6, what does it do to the graph? Well, I hope you can all tell me that it's going to flip over the graph across the x-axis. So hopefully you see that this works exactly the same as sine. If you have questions, please make sure that you ask me and address them during class. But otherwise, I'm going to go back 2 slides, and I really want you to memorize the cosine graph. What does the cosine graph do? It starts high, it goes low, down to the minimum, and then it finishes back high in one cycle.